and served in both fighter and fighter bomber roles. Flying it here today, please welcome Colonel Ole Noren. This aircraft first flew in 1948, introduced into frontline service in 1950, serving primarily with the Swedish Air Force and the Austrian Air Force. Remained in production for 6 years, right through to 1956, and over 660 of them were actually built. You can see the agility of that, of course, but the earlier range of aircraft certainly didn't have the design characteristics to enable them to make such tight corners, and of course the G mitigation measures not as great in the early generation of fighters, so using more airspace than you would expect to see of current fourth generation fighters. A strong air defence built around a newly developed jet propulsion technology. And development of this began just after the end of the war in 1945, with a couple of proposals being put forward. The first designs looking for a cigar-shaped aircraft similar to the Lockheed P-80. But in Sweden, the winning design was this barrel design that you see now. It was codenamed at the time the R1001. That was mainly because it proved to be faster and agile. Of course, alongside at the same time the development of the MiG-15 was taking place. Of course, that became hugely successful, with 18,000 of those eventually being built and used in combat. Original design of this actually had a straight wing, but after researching the data from the German swept wing designers, the prototype of this aircraft was altered to incorporate a 25-degree sweep. It's quite interesting how the German designers were in many ways just slightly ahead of the Allied forces in many different ways, with rocket propulsion, of course, towards the end of the Second World War as well, and the first jet-powered fighter aircraft as well. And even in the design of the elliptical wings on the Spitfire, Heinkel was already there, factory already involved in those sort of designs. But a member of the SAAB engineering team had been allowed to review the German aeronautical documents that were stored in Switzerland. They were captured by the Americans in 1945 and indicated a whole series of delta and swept wing designs, mainly to reduce the effect of drag. That was particularly necessary when the aircraft came close to exceeding the sound barrier. And this therefore flying in September 48, right at the leading edge of development alongside other countries at the time. A small chubby aircraft, single central air intake, a bubble cockpit and a very thin swept back wing. The test pilot for them was actually an Englishman, I believe an ex-Army Major, Robert Moore, went on to become the first managing director of SAAB GB. And a fairly blunt description of this aircraft. He said on the ground it was an ugly duckling, but in the air, a swift. The Tunnan actually set a world speed record at the time, of well over 500 kilometers an hour in a closed circuit. When it came into service, the Swedish Air Force was the 5th most powerful air force in the world. The other 4 ahead, the US, the Soviet Union, the UK and France. Like so many early aircraft though, including our own British designs at the time, the accident rate was pretty severe. And instead of expecting again one more pass there, very sadly Tintin telling us that, Ole, in this instance Ole saying that he has to return to base. So I think you'll find